Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today on this virtual fireside chat, the Workplace Reimagined, delivering business agility through secure cloud-based networking. We are very happy to have our speakers here with us. Firstly, we have Nishchal, Senior Director ICT of Frost Sullivan, and he will be moderating the session. And we have Alexandra Gates, Director Cloud Networking Strategy of Extreme Network. Next, we have Ravindra, Head of Information Technology, Toy Ohomai Institute of Technology, and Rubaiyat, Head of IT and Cybersecurity from DocDoc. And lastly, we have Damien Foster, IT Systems Manager, Damascus College. We hope you enjoy the session, and I shall now pass it over to Nishchal, who will take you through this session. Enjoy.
Thank you, and a very warm welcome to everyone. So I think while we've been talking about digital transformation, and I think the last I don't know how many webinars that I've done over the quarter or two, uh, clearly workplace transformation is one of the most permanent changes, if I may put it this way. It's going to completely transform, not from a year standpoint, but probably from for years to come, right? We talk about economy being a U-shaped curve, the V-shaped curve, but I think workplace is going to change forever, right? It will change the way we physically interact, the way we collaborate with peers. We talk about decentralized environments, and clearly, all this has a huge implication on the IT environment, both in terms of the challenges as well as the opportunities. So, thank you everyone on the panel, and I think we have a very interesting panel here to discuss this topic today. But even before we get into the technology aspect and the cloud aspect or the networking aspect, what I would love to hear from each one of you is what does really workplace of future mean for you, right? Each of us come with very diverse experiences, so maybe each one of us can share what does it mean for us, right? So, Rabindra, if you want to go first, what is this workplace of the future for you?
Sure. Possibly more remote working by administrative and teaching staff, probably more blended courses for students, which is sometimes difficult when courses are very vocational trades based. We can deliver courses via a variety of mechanisms like Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, Adobe Connect. However, I think the challenge is equity. We have a very diverse learning base from all areas of the Bay of Plenty. Some of those areas are challenged when it comes to ADSL or fibre. So how do students connect? Hopefully 5G will address some of those issues, but I believe the changes will happen and they will be there in the future. I think within my team, within the IT team, I'm finding that collaboration is taking a bit of a hit through the remote working. So yes, we've got Microsoft Teams, but it's not the same as chatting to the colleague next to you and then grabbing somebody else. You know, you're less inclined to jump into a meeting space and to dial them up to have that conversation. So we're challenged with collaboration through informal discussions, and I think that's something which is certainly top of mind for me.
Excellent. So the way you're delivering your services all the way up to the way you're sitting within the own office space and the way you're collaborating, right? Excellent.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Alexandra, maybe I would like to hear your thoughts on what does workplace of the future mean for you?
Definitely. So my life and my workplace have changed really rapidly over the last year. I went from flying around the world every week, going out into different countries, different states, working out of my airplane seat or working out of a hotel room or conference center, to working in my home office. And obviously that's more distributed. I think that workplaces are going to be more distributed going forward, even when we return to somewhat of a normal state. But you know, workers that are spread out a lot more, they're still needing connectivity, but it's not necessarily in the same model we've seen before. And overall, I think the workplace of the future is more dependent on networking. There's more devices, more IoT, more video, again, more locations that need to be covered. And it's really about connecting everyone, making sure that you have access to the resources you need, the people you need to communicate with. And that's kind of my opinion of what I think we're moving towards and what we're dealing with right now as well.
And I think that's a very interesting point, right? Because on one hand, Rabindra was talking about collaboration, and on the other hand, we're talking about more distributed workforce and more endpoints, right? So, and there's a natural paradox in the two which this technology has to bring in together. Rubai, over to you. Same question. What does workplace of the future mean for you?
Yeah, thanks, Nishchal. So, I think the whole world, we are seeing that we are moving towards remote working and virtual meetings. So, even if in future if the situation become normal, I think this remote working model and virtual meetings might become a new strategic part for cost optimization. In contrast to the previously we seen the outsourcing, so the company might prefer being remotely working rather than outsourcing to a third party. So to support these things, the virtual meeting and collaboration technology, which we are using right now, I'm definitely sure that these will become more AI driven. For example, in future technology, they may allow automated note taking, generate actions in the meeting automatically without human intervention, and give us more and more reports because people may be working from different time zones and different locations. So, and obviously, Alexander mentioned that more and more IoT will be connected. So I think we'll see that people probably need not to carry laptops anymore. They will be working from a lot of other items, connected items, IoT. So there is a huge challenge in this managing this distributed working technology and devices, especially the security of, it will be not limited to a on-premise. It will become much more distributed anywhere in the world, I think. So this will become how we manage all these connected devices and connected people and still become flexible because on premise we have a lot of control, but when it becomes distributed, the control is not there, but we still have to be flexible so people can do their work easily. So that may be a future change how we manage all these distributed working style.
Excellent points. Yep. Damien, same question.
Look, it's a pretty good question. Like we've spent the last, 15, 20 years putting people into workplaces and, the offices, the cubicle, whatever it is, putting people into a box. And now all of a sudden, because of this change in dynamic, it is now about taking people out of those boxes and still having them not only operational, but effective and communicating. So it's the threshold shift of getting your employees and your co-workers to be as effective and be as accessible as they would be, in an office space compared to where they would be when they're working from home. But I think one of the main questions that I suppose is probably always the last one to get asked, because it is a very tricky one, is the security and the end-to-end protection of not only all the communications between people, whether it's video, voice, or whatever, but it's all the IP as well that's floating around. And the workplace of the future is going to have to really think quite hard about how it not only handles company IP and company information going from devices on home networks out and back and forth, but where does that data sit? How does that data get from point to point? There's a lot more questions floating around that, but not just for your big businesses. Your small to medium enterprise have really just been, well, I can get on Teams and I'll put it on a USB hard drive, and all these informal processes that now no longer cut the mustard in the day-to-day, where a simple exploit can really offer great leverage for someone who's interested in not only your company, but leveraging your company for whatever ends they deem necessary. So the new workplace is going to have to be a big threshold shift for the people working in it, not just to think about how do I do my job, but how do I do my job in a more secure way to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence to protect the people that I'm working for as well.
Excellent, Devin. So you actually touched on the next point, right? And it's a very valid point that while we're talking about this new workplace, clearly there'll have to be multiple technologies which will come in place, either which were used earlier will gain more traction, or you will see new technologies really being deployed to make this workplace come to life, right? It could be right from the point you enter the organization and using facial recognition to probably the way you have a cup of coffee or whatever it may be. And Rabindra was sharing with us something very interesting before we got into this discussion. So there'll be multiple technologies which will play a role. And you touched upon a few of them. You talked about surveillance, security cameras, devices, security applications. So what are the different application areas? Quickly, just telling me broad buckets that come to your mind, which will really play a very pivotal role in building this workplace of the future.
Well, when you take someone out of their typical working environment, I suppose the physical security is always the one that is the bottom underlier that will always get a possible threat or someone with enough foothold to start doing some damage. And I think that the big threshold shift will be how people interact with their devices and what they plug into them. Because more often than not, the best way sometimes to get an organization is just on a USB stick that's accidentally left around, or when people are having to work remotely and their work laptop's not playing ball, so they get their personal laptop, or they turn on that, like what we've had with remote learning with 1,300 students. We've had all kinds of old school devices being turned on for makeshift work here and there for mum and dad. And there's been some interesting players from the early, from the early thousands and early 2010s of some of these devices being exposed to a lot of interesting content, and having those physically sorted out is probably the first thing. The second thing I'd probably say really quick is the fabric you're talking over, making sure that the simple basic checks and balances in place to make sure that your home network has at least got some basic understanding of security and protection on it, to protect you as well as everything going across it.
Okay, excellent. So you're still talking more on the security side, which I completely agree with you is going to be very critical, both from a physical and data security standpoint. Ravindra, what technologies come to your mind when we talk about this workplace of the future?
Yeah, it's similar for me too. It's about access to the tools, the underlying network and security. Office 365, for example, provides great security. It's an online platform. We use it internally, but we can also provide that platform to our students. So staff can already work remotely, and as we've seen through lockdown, they can work without paper-based systems. But security is a big challenge for us. Staff and students connecting remotely, it needs to be well planned and managed. So for me, the security tools, both at a user level, but also a network level, are pivotal for me. I think we have to have a balance between accessibility and having the assurance and knowledge that organizational data is secure and protected. So staff are really just starting to accept that trade-off between flexibility of remote access to systems, anywhere, anytime, any device, along with stricter password policies, multi-factor authentication, but you have to educate them, and I think that's one of the key things. They need to know why, and you need to explain that and train them.
So Ravindra, why don't you share that coffee cup experience that you were telling us about? Right? Because I think it's going to be a lot about these small things which you're going to use more contactless in a way, right? If you're okay with that, we would love to hear that.
Absolutely. So today I was sent a little gift, tap to pay. So this is a coffee cup, and basically you set it up remotely through your Apple iPhone or your Google, your Android device, and you set it up with your credit card. And in most countries you've got in New Zealand, it's $80, and then you don't have to put your PIN in. So this is a quick way of buying a cup of coffee and just tap in the coffee cup on the merchant device to pay. And that's a great way of buying a cup of coffee without getting your cash out, without getting plastic out. So I think in the past we used to say, okay, paperless office. Well, it's going to be, plasticless, almost. You don't need your plastic credit card. So that's a good innovation, and that's kind of changing the way we think about we should be thinking about how our workplace is changing. The only thing is that people could take it off your desk and go get a coffee, but it's a novel way of using it. Whether I give it to someone else because I'm not going to risk it, I don't know, but it is a different way of working, and we're going to see more of these type of things. But we have to think about security, and me leaving it on my desk, it could go walkers and somebody else could use it.
Yeah, absolutely agree. We're going to see more of these kind of things which we probably have not thought of yet, and I'm sure it just keep coming in and then completely permeate our workplace. Alexandra, technologies that come to your mind which are going to be pivotal?
So in terms of enabling this, more remote workplace or all the challenges that everyone's been dealing with, really, I think it goes back to the network infrastructure, the applications that are running, all the devices, the communication. This is all happening over wireless typically. You need the switches to power the wireless access points. You need the routers to route traffic appropriately. So again, those pieces of hardware are important. But I think an even more important story that kind of encompasses all of that is how you're going to manage these networks going forward. We've seen through our cloud platform, the amount of data that's moving through networks has almost quadrupled over the last 6 months or so as people are depending more and more on the network to connect, whether it be for educational purposes, for business purposes, or personal. People are streaming things at home. So that actual equipment is important. But the ability of IT professionals, and a lot of the ones on the call today, is the management, being able to see that all of your devices are up and running, making sure that they have secure connections, ensuring that the devices that are connecting are the ones that are supposed to, and they have access to the resources that they should. And again, this is even more remote than we've ever seen before. You might have had a campus type deployment where you're managing hundreds of devices in a single location. Now think of that as hundreds of devices across hundreds of locations, and you need to make sure that the network is still up and running. It's scalable as your needs might change or adapt, as different organizations in different locations have different rules around who is able to come into a building, who's not, who needs to stay home. So I think those are all the things that we as a networking equipment provider and cloud management provider, that's what we're trying to ensure for our customers to make sure they have the connectivity they need.
Right. Rupa, you come with an experience in the healthcare sector. Maybe just want to hear you out. If you can walk us through the case study, what is it that you're seeing change?
Yeah, right. Thanks. So during this pandemic, obviously, we know that most of us are working from home. So as a side effect, I think working from home for a long time probably also come with some stress. So we may see a lot of us might having stress-related problems. This also may get increased in this healthcare sector. But same time, to deal with this urgent situation of COVID-19, so hospitals are obviously forced to rethink that how they can serve urgent patients versus other patients who may not have urgent conditions. So distributing their resource for urgent versus non-urgent becoming also a big issue in these healthcare sectors. And same time, as a patient, many of us actually who need regular follow-up for our chronic conditions, or maybe not so serious condition like minor symptoms. Sometimes we are scared to visit to the hospital or visit a doctor because of a panic created between us. And sometimes in many countries where the situation is not that good, traveling to the another city is also not allowed. So this actually creating a huge demand for that. How can I access the healthcare without visiting the hospital or without physically meeting the doctor in a safe way? So I think that's why the healthcare sector is now trying to become more digital and providing virtual care, for example, which was previous, for example, like telemedicine. So, but it is not right now limited to telemedicine. They're trying to extend this virtual cares to a lot of other disciplines. For example, a digital healthcare service obviously help us to reduce these non-urgent visits to minimum, and we can still access those healthcare delivery without visiting the doctor. So I think it's also allowed, for example, where we cannot travel to another city in the same country. So still we can access this healthcare service from our home. And also, I think our hospitals have to manage their urgent patients, so they can have some resources allocated for the telemedicine or virtual delivery. So this helps them to reduce the influx in their improvised patients and manage their resource effectively. So, but to enable this virtual care, obviously hospitals and clinics have to be digital. But a lot of them actually were not digital previously because of traditional healthcare system. But I think that's why telemedicine is now actually expanding rapidly, and where the providers can provide virtual consultation So that's why this in this area, like healthcare providers, technology providers like DocDoc, actually helping them to quickly enable their infrastructure to provide telemedicine consults. Same time, this is virtual care is not limited to telemedicine also, because even though all consultation or all conditions cannot be treated remotely, so still the patients need to find out who is the right doctor for him, do some intelligent doctor discovery, book appointments, make their payments cashless, all those things. So this also may in future expand, like where we can have sample collection, medicine delivery, test delivery, all done without physically visiting the premises for the labs of the hospital. So a lot of hospitals who previously did not have this kind of digital infrastructure, they can easily leverage any cloud-based digital health technology, so that they don't need to invest too much on their in-premise technology, but they can subscribe to a cloud-based healthcare technology and easily enable this remote capability to provide virtual healthcare. So I think this is something we are seeing that increasing in a exponential manner, and they're connected digital and providing virtual care.
That's a great point, and I'll take a pause here because, Damien, I have a question for you. Then in that case, right? So we're talking a lot about collaboration. That means at endpoints. We spoke about employees working. So you're giving a lot more technology to people remotely, right? And even the examples that Rubai is giving of more telemedicine, managing doctors remotely, you are eventually going to be giving a lot more applications in a far more distributed environment, which means you would be sitting on a lot of data, which is really going to be important for you to really make sense of, and you can churn out a lot more intelligence from the data, right, that you will have now than you probably ever had in the future. So what role do you think will this whole analytics play in this scheme of things?
Well, the data is probably the biggest revolution that we've seen so far. It's no longer about who are the sales contacts that we can get, that we need to touch base with, or simple Excel spreadsheets of people you've called. We're talking about very verbose, very down to the dots and I's and T's of not only how people are connecting, but when the devices were last online, are they compliant? Do they, how are they connecting over, and what kind of connections they're making over their wireless and wired infrastructures, whether it be at home or on campus? And it becomes a question of not only how are you going to use it, but your absolute need to really pay attention to what your data is telling you about not only your users but their behaviors. Because operationally and then strategically, you can start not only making better decisions where, in the typical IT support space, it's always a reactive thing. If someone's coming to you with a problem post the event happening, whereas with your analytics that you get, like, for example, Extreme's Cloud IQ for the wireless, you can make a lot better, not only strategic decisions about how you're seeing the people connecting up, but also about how you can probably spot problems before they become a problem. You can see abnormal user behaviors. You can see higher than normal data transfer in a particular application. Again, this is all coming from our deployment here at the college over the last 4 or 5 years with Extreme. Using literally the layer 1 to layer 7 data of how users are behaving and how and what their behaviors are. So we can see there's a very big oddity today on data usage. We can then align that to like whether it's a Windows update heavy day, or it's the end of term and everyone's just chucking on Netflix to get through those last couple of days. But that data and the way you analyze that, it's critical to not only business operations but strategic points moving forward, when you've got so many devices talking online. And likewise, the cloud is where it's really being delivered, because you can pull all this information together from your Extreme IQ, from your on-premise systems, and I mean, you can jam it together in as many different things you want, but it just simply takes a set of eyes and a little bit of time to analyze, to be able to go, I can see trends growing, and I can get ahead of them before they become a problem, whether it's backhaul, whether it's configuration, and that kind of data is invaluable to a workforce that is working, anywhere and everywhere on any kind of platform and in any kind of seat. Like Alexandria was saying, she was working from the seat in the plane to the hotel room to the car on the road, and being able to understand how the people are working and seeing the data come back to you. That's going to be critical in how we put some sort of control mechanisms and some sort of support mechanisms around making sure that people actually have not only the tools they need, but the support when the tools break.
Excellent. So Alexandra, now that's a question for you now. If we're talking about, and taking from where Damien's left it, right, the role of data and the role of analytics, the role of tools, an underlying layer of making this happen will be your IT infrastructure, right? And that's where we've seen the conversation on the cloud. We've seen so much conversation about the infrastructure. So what I would like to hear from you, Alexandra, is what do you think will be the role of cloud, and how do you see it really playing a pivotal role?
Yeah, it's a big question, and pretty much every major networking vendor is addressing that in some way today. If you look even 4 years ago, most vendors were offering kind of that on-premises controller-based management. It was a box, a physical piece of hardware. You probably needed to be on site to set it up or to troubleshoot. But as Damien was saying, with kind of all of this data and how we're trying to enable it, learn from it, gain intelligence, that was really when, as an industry, vendors started moving towards cloud networking in general. And cloud was introduced 10 to 12 years ago now. It's been a long journey where we've moved, and the actual underlying infrastructure has improved quite a bit as well. We moved through kind of these first and second generation clouds that were virtualizing some of the services that used to be on site, moving into kind of a third generation cloud about 5 years ago, where you introduce the concept of microservices to make sure that the cloud was reliable, it was scalable, you didn't have any downtime when you needed to access it. And most recently, vendors are starting to move into this fourth generation space, is kind of how we talk about it. And the main components here, again, are that 100% uptime so that you don't lose connection, you don't lose the management capabilities, the troubleshooting capabilities, the visibility. But in addition to that, the actual artificial intelligence and machine learning that are starting to be incorporated into the networks, we're feeding those engines with data points. And that's the beauty of the cloud, is you can access unlimited data stores. So something we offer for our customers is unlimited data for the life of that cloud management, meaning you can historically go back and access information. You can look at real-time information. There's a lot of different ways that you can interact with the tool, and it's a lot easier to enable remote networking. You don't have to be on site. You can be sitting on a beach somewhere and access one of your locations on the other side of the world, make a change to an access point, troubleshoot a device that's having issues connecting. So a lot more in terms of what you have the ability to see, but also the control over the network. And that's what we think is being driven by cloud. And that's kind of our journey and our goal over the next couple of years, is to be a fully cloud-driven end-to-end networking vendor, whether it's the edge of the network or into the data center, to be able to utilize those tools with any mix of hardware to help our customers succeed, however the world's going to change going forward.
Excellent, Alexandra. Some great points there, Ravindra. Now for you to pick up from, we're talking about an anytime, anywhere environment, cloud being deployed to make that happen. But clearly, the availability will be dependent on the networks, right? So again, your experience on how you see the network transformation happening, and what's maybe most critical for organizations to consider. Sorry, Ravindra, you're on mute, I think.
Sorry about that. Yeah, networking is important, and people sometimes either forget it or dismiss it. But certainly for my organisation, in 2016, we had 2 regional polytechs merge to form Tohama Institute of Technology. And our focus initially was on the consistency and equity of services essentially ensuring that the customer experience was in no way affected by our merger. So our students still had services, our staff were still able to connect. However, as we started to try and establish parity with services, we began to face a number of issues. And it was largely down to the complexity of having multiple network vendors, meaning that we were working overtime just to do simple tasks, like ensuring cookies were enabled for students for a number of days. So another challenge was just ensuring that staff moving from one location to another had the same Wi-Fi networks available and they could authenticate in the same way. Again, these were challenges in the early days that we had to look to resolve, and it's all down to networking and the equipment. We had a mix of Cisco, HP, Extreme, and Motorola, all on the same network. So we recognized early on we had to get things going, we had to really consolidate those providers. And we realized that our digital transformation journey was going to rely heavily on a consistent user experience, and we felt that this needed a robust and experience at every campus, every entry point, essentially. So adoption of change was really going to be successful if it worked first time and then every time. So that was one of the key things that we kind of agreed on. Our strategy at Tohumai was to provide a platform that met the current and future business requirements, and some of the future stuff were probably unknown. We could probably guess some of the things, really starting to do some of the things 2 years on, but we had to consider those, because typically you're making a 5 to 7 year investment. So one of the things we knew was that we needed a platform which was fast, flexible, reliable, and efficient to operate. So we needed a converged feature set so we could do the same thing on every device. We needed to replace aged hardware. That was one big thing. We need application of good security practices. We had to future-proof the platform, and we also wanted to select a network vendor that added value to what we were looking to do. So the approach that we took was that we held a number of sessions, focus groups with our senior leadership team, as well as different stakeholder groups, really to discuss their requirements. And there were a number of requirements that came through that we'd already considered, and there was a few that came up that were really nagging points that they'd either raised before or they just kind of saw that this is where we need to go. So guest access, either for prospective students or people visiting the institution, that was a key thing. We saw in the regions a lot more students didn't have data on their phone. So when they're using Gmail with two-factor authentication, they've got no data and they couldn't connect to the Wi-Fi. So they couldn't get the study link where they get the student loans. They couldn't get that information and sign up there and then. So that was something that we needed to consider, providing some form of walled garden to Tohumai services and access for anyone coming on campus. Internet of Things, it was quite small 2-3 years ago, but it's starting to grow. So horticulture is an area where it's growing. And so we needed to consider that for growth and how that was going to work. Beacons and sensors, RFID, those are things that we are looking to utilize now. We've got a number of applications that are in the pipeline. Everything from occupancy, tracking information, and I think Damien touched on a couple of those as well. We're looking at tracking some of our own equipment, believe it or not. We've got a lot of laptop carts around the campuses, and just keeping track of where they are is sometimes difficult. So the benefits of bringing consolidation is that we ended up with Extreme Networks, and we've now got a resilient network which has given us higher bandwidth. We've got faster connections, much better security, greater coverage and consistency of services. So we've invested in a network which gives us all those things, and I think for the IT team, the biggest benefit has been a single pane of glass to manage all of this, to track it, to monitor it, to upgrade it, and to really ensure that we know what's going on We can see what's going on. We can upgrade all the devices from a single pane of glass across 74 different locations. So it gives us, it's improved our efficiency in operating, which is a big thing. We have staff moving across campuses, and that's become seamless. There are no issues. We don't get any tickets anymore I can do this at this location, but not at this location. We don't get that anymore. It's very much consistent. The engineers now only need to understand one set of code, how to manage one switch, one type of switch, rather than 3 or 4 different vendor switches. So it's made things a lot easier from that perspective. We've got our guest portal. We don't have to get involved in, we've got so-and-so coming today, can you give them access? We don't get involved. It's a guest portal. They know how to approve them and so on. We've got students, prospective students being able to connect. So we've resolved that issue. They can connect. They don't need data on the phone to get their Gmail and to authenticate. So it's made life a lot simpler. We've got an increased use of video, either coming onto campus or going around campus. But there's an increase in demand for video, whether it's as learning material or video conferencing and desktop conferencing. We have a lot more meetings, a lot more staff working remotely, and therefore a lot more video calling and so on. So the investments we've made have enabled, given us a platform to really take our digital transformation on board and to push out a number of tools. And I think one of the successes of that transformation is that the people are the only issues that we've had to deal with, in terms of training them. The back end has been rock solid. It's not been an issue. We've not had to consider anything for that part. And so it's allowed us to transform and implement new solutions, and without real technology issues, really. So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, Ravindra, that answers a lot, and that's also pushes in a lot of questions forward, right? So, Damien, I'm going to ask you this question now. So while we're really trying to build this futuristic workplace, which I don't think is futuristic anymore, if you ask me, it's here and now. I mean, if we would have been having this conversation maybe 3 years earlier, we would have talked more futuristic. But I think it's a here and now conversation. What are the challenges that you really see in making this happen, right? Theoretically, there's a lot to be done. We're talking about many technologies. We're talking about networks, IT infrastructure, business models, etc. But what are the challenges that you really see? And I know you touched upon it earlier as well, but if you can elaborate a little more on what are the challenges that you see making this happen. Sorry, Damien, that's for you, and you're on mute.
So, like I was just thinking about this before. A funny tweet I saw a long while ago was a guy put up said, the future is silly because I can't update my oscilloscope because my light bulb stole its IP address. And in that there is one of the many reasons why, or one of the big challenges, that people are facing is that 2 or 3 or 4 years ago, I suppose being operational for a lot of my life, working from home, working remotely, working wherever is it just happens. You set up your laptop, you go and you do what you need to do. Was it easy? No, because you had to jump into things to get stuff done. And I think there's an expectation that's rolled with that in terms of how folks just want to be able to get on and work. And when things don't work, just they turn laptop on, start getting in Teams and start typing things on. There's a lot of angst and a lot of pressure because people just want to get stuff done. But they don't understand that between their laptop and the other end, there are a lot of small, intricate, tiny things that can always break. And the big challenge is how do you stay on top of those small little cogs in the giant machine to make sure that when Barb from finance goes home to do the payroll, she can click, and the payroll goes through smoothly. Everyone's happy because everyone gets paid. It becomes really tricky, but where I think the newer interfaces, the cloud-based management, and stepping away from these devices that either you can only console into, or you have to get on campus to be able to fix. We can now sit there and be able to see how things are plugged together, why they're behaving in such ways. We can see, you can see device behaviors and connectivity markers really kind of before sometimes there's a problem. But when you then have to get hands deep in and start getting right into the crux of a problem, you have the ability to really make quick fixes very fast, very accurately, for when you don't need, or you don't have time to do all the due diligence in the world to be able to find out which little cog just needs a quick little spin to get going again. But I think to answer the question concisely, the big problem is, how do you keep all these plates spinning? How do you keep all these cogs turning? So that way people can have, what Rabinder said was saying before, that they can move between campuses seamlessly, they can work from home seamlessly, they can get involved and get into what they need to quickly and easily. Because when it's not quick and easy, people have a tendency to get those help desk emails pretty rock solid, pretty quick.
Excellent. Making it quick and easy and seamless, right? So I think that those are three takeaways. But Alexandra, same question to you. But when we're trying to make it quick and easy and seamless, what are the challenges that you see in really making this happen?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to, again, the vendors that you're working with. Some networking vendors have more disjointed solutions. They have one set of services that work on site, maybe another set of services that work in the cloud. So it's really about interviewing the vendor, making sure that their solution is customizable. It's not one size fits all. You can actually choose something that's going to meet the needs of your organization. I think that's going to be, a challenge that once you've gotten over that, it's going to lead to a lot more success if it's something that's actually going to work with you and work with your environment as it changes. That would be my biggest recommendation to kind of get over those challenges.
Yeah. So, Rawat, you shared a lot of information about putting this whole telemedicine and healthcare, collaboration in place. In your experience, right, what were the challenges that you faced?
I think for the cloud-based service model, there is two challenges. One is that when working from a distributed location, we inherently preferred, say, VPN as a de facto standard to connect remotely, right? But I think most of the technology for VPN, we anticipate that maybe 10% or 20% people will actually connect. The rest of the infrastructure will work as it is. But this current situation forced that actually majority, or in some cases 100% of people connecting remotely. So I think the challenge is that how we have to move out of this VPN and come up with more flexible, like software-defined network or software-defined parameters. So we need a service provider who can support these kind of things. Otherwise, a VPN gateway may become a single point of failure. And that's one thing. And another challenge is that actually when employees are connecting from home, so the home device is actually basically shared between the family, right? It's not easy for also a privacy question. We just cannot monitor a home device from a corporate network. So probably we need some kind of compartmentalized technology. For example, for the servers, we use Docker kind of stuff. But for these home devices, we also need some compartmentalization or maybe virtual desktop kind of solution, so that the corporate apps will run on this space and the personal space will be separated or segregated from this space. So this is a two challenge we face when we want to support a secure remote and distributed working model.
Right. So, Ravindra, I'll come back to you with this right now. Clearly, I think we all accept the fact that these things need to be done. We need to put the technologies together. We will have to create this workplace of the future, as we're calling it. But at the same time, each one of us have faced challenges in getting that act together, right? It could be right from strategizing to planning to implementation to networks to security. Multiple challenges could have really come in place. But there have to be some success factors, right? So what would you suggest as to our listeners? What would the success factors be in getting the act together and really making the workplace of the future really a workplace that we can really create a competitive differentiation and survive in this new environment?
Yeah, I think planning is probably the big one, and understanding what you do within your organization. How much data is going from A to B. These are quite important things, because if you get it wrong, then you suddenly have an issue. So that was one thing that we needed to understand. We're fortunate we run 10 gig across our backbones and across all the fiber links. So we've got plenty of bandwidth, but to a specific building where there might be 200 machines, that may not cut it. So we need to make sure that we do have plenty of bandwidth, and you need to do the planning. So there are some basics that you need to do in terms of capacity planning. I think the big challenge really is education, in terms of making sure that you've got a team that can be adaptive and learn the new skills that are needed, not just in networking, but in security, because it's all interlinked now. And that's the biggest challenge that we face. We went down the path of looking at our networking, and thankfully we had a security consultant work alongside us. So we were able to consider that. And some of my guys are training and learning the security side of things, even though they know the networking side, but they're still learning the security. And it's a big challenge for them in terms of, okay, they've got to be thinking about that all the time. Security is a wrapper around everything you do these days, whether it's on-premise or cloud. No different. Everything's got to have a security lens on it at some stage. And I think that's a challenge when things become so easy to procure. We've got teams, even in our institute, that go out and procure services and want us to federate with them when we know nothing about it. We know nothing about how they're storing their data. We don't know where the data is being stored, in which country. So those are all questions that need to be asked, and it comes down to education. I think the big thing for my team is training, and that's something us as an organisation have invested in. And I think the other element as well for the rest of the organisation is digital literacy. It's all well having everything stable and robust and having all the technology there, but if they don't know how to use the tools, then what's the point? And I think a good example is when we went into lockdown, it really showed the best and the worst of people in terms of who could and who couldn't. And we were fortunate; we were on Windows 10. We had Microsoft VPN always on. So some people coped, some people didn't have a laptop, so they used their own device. So they're reliant on Citrix, and some people struggle to explain or describe what they were getting stuck with. They couldn't describe, some people asked us, what's a browser, as an example. And when you're dealing with that level of literacy, and this is in a educational establishment, it's pretty challenging. So I think a lot of it revolves around education. So you can do your planning. I think that's a must. But you've also got to consider training your staff, training your IT staff, and security is a big gap for a lot of traditional teams. And it's an area which, you can bring in and you can buy in, but it becomes quite costly when you've got to do it day in, day out, and you've got to do it day in, day out. And I think also digital literacy across the whole organisation. Does everyone know why they're doing MFA and what the importance is? And we've taken steps and we've invested in cyber awareness training and things like that to kind of help staff. And hopefully some of it will rub off into their personal life. So when they're buying a coffee with the cup, they don't just leave it and walk off afterwards. They're going to take it with them because they know it's got a monetary value to it. Somebody else could use it, tap and go. So I think it's all about education largely.
So you talked about planning, you talked about network capacity. I heard you say, and of course, a lot about education, right? Both on the IT side and the user side. Yeah. And I completely agree with you there that it's not going to happen if you don't get these pieces of the puzzle correct, right? Which is fantastic. Alexandra, same question to you, which is, to you, while we discussed a lot of challenges earlier on in building the workplace of the future, what are the success factors? So if you were to advise the listeners, what are the pieces that they need to consider? What are the success factors they need to consider in getting it right? What would that be?
So in terms of advice, it would be, again, speaking with your vendor ahead of time, making sure that they're going to be able to meet your needs, not only today, but also as those evolve into the future. And I think, as you know, we've talked a lot about cloud today, and kind of the theme of this is making sure that you're utilizing a modern cloud infrastructure that will actually be able to grow and adapt, especially as technologies change, as environments change. And that might mean being able to containerize certain applications to enhance your management. And Damien mentioned it, I think one of the other panelists mentioned it, but having a single place that you can go to see what's going on, to solve problems, to deploy your network. These network administrators don't have time to log into 7 different systems to make sure everything's working, or make a small change in one system and then see how it affects another one. So I think it's more of that cohesive management, the cohesive visibility, and that's really going to drive success moving forward.
Excellent. So I like the flow, right? Ravindra was talking about the planning. The more the pre-implementation part, right? The planning, the education, and you taking it forward, and you're talking more about post, of course, involving the vendors from a best practices perspective, but also you're mentioning about the governance aspect, and really keeping things managing it in the right way, because you cannot manage such a disparate IT infrastructure if you don't have your architecture correct. It's a question to you as well, and it's going to be good to listen to you, since you've done some work very recently. What was the success factor? Rubai, you're on mute, and can you hear me?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? There was a little.
Yeah. So the question is, what are the success factors to build this workplace in the future that we talked about? So we spoke about many technologies, and what is the success factor for you to building this correctly?
Yeah, I think there is 2 factors. One is that the regulatory compliance, because even it's healthcare or financial, whatever sector we work in, we have to make sure, because of data is now not only stored in premise, it's distributed. So complying with the requirement and same time be flexible in a distributed model is one of the key success factors. So I think we have to come up with a plan and architecture that supports the distributed model, same time the data is secured, and still help us to make sure that it's secure, it's compliant with the requirement. Because I think probably in future the standards that were built for in-premise or more tighter technology will a bit change, and they will also give us idea how we can comply with this kind of distributed environment. So that will be one of the key success factors from my side, that how we comply with those regulations and still serve all the purposes. And Nishchal, I think you're on mute.
Yes, I was on mute. So everybody gets a chance to be on mute once. Okay. So Damien, over to you. Same question. Success factors.
Success is really going to be holistically focused around how do you manage it, because when you start playing with multiple vendors, multiple interfaces, it's about how do you keep things running, because workplace of the future. Workplace of the future is now. Like we're talking that everyone expects things are online, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're a high school here, and we're not a dealing room. We're not doing in the stock market. We're not dabbling in big money here. But we see things that people are working odd hours, and they're doing a lot more extra time, especially with the pandemic and how it's been focused there. So. It's about tooling, and it's about, I suppose, support education, because you can have all the tools that you want, but if the guy at the other end hasn't had the time to really delve into it, they can feel very lost. Whereas with new, modern, cloud-based infrastructure that's managed in a simple pane of glass that allows the quick, big, easy levers to be flicked for whatever reason, whether it's rebooting a switch or changing a VLAN or making adjustments to policy-based routing, any of those kind of things, they can be done quickly and efficiently. And having that access and that accessibility to be able to do such things, that is going to be the big measure of success, because we've all been there when you've got someone who's on the other end of the phone and you need to get something done ASAP, and that they would not care if you had to move heaven and earth or whatever, but you needed to get that done. When you have when you've got the information put in front of you and you can hit it and make a decision quick and clean to resolve something reasonably significant very quickly, it changes the way that you work, because you're not stressed about how many different things. Like I think it was, I think everyone in the panel's mentioned it, trying to consolidate 5-6 different threads. What could possibly be the problem? Just being able to pull that into one single pool of information to be able to make an educated decision there, that's going to be the big success measure, because it's less about people working and making sure you can keep them working.
Absolutely, fantastic. So we have a few questions which are very tied to what Emin you just mentioned and what we've been discussing. And Rubai, this one is for you. The question is, while you talked about the medical aspect and telemedicine and endpoint devices, right? Clearly, security will be very critical in this kind of environment to manage. So how did you really go about the security aspect to ensure that we have the right deployments?
So the virtual healthcare ecosystem, so it's a bit kind of hybrid model. So the patients may be remote, they can connect from anywhere, but a doctor's not necessarily providing all the services from home, because doctors are regulated by medical regulation. They have to provide a service from a hospital or clinic. So it's a more secure premise, and they have to maintain that they follow all the regulations, privacy regulation, medical regulation, and security in their premise before they deliver a healthcare. So I think that's how it is managed. So the healthcare provider ensures that whatever service they provide, they follow all the regulation, they make sure the patient's confidentiality is there, the patient's data is secure, and then they go virtual or digital to provide the healthcare to the end user. Sure.
And Alexandra, maybe taking a different perspective of the same question is in the cloud environment, right? Again, the audience is keen to know that we're talking about the cloud. So is there any best practice, any recommendation for creating that secure cloud environment? And I think I've been having this conversation over the last decade, right? The moment that the cloud piece started, the biggest conversation, and even till date, is security on the cloud, right? So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that. One is the actual cloud tool. Is it secure? Is your data going to be secure? Are your devices going to be secure? So again, talk to your vendor. There's different certifications. Most of the big cloud providers, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they have certifications that they have to comply with. And then in addition to that, vendors can have additional like ISO 27001 certifications you can ask about. Definitely privacy things like GDPR, HIPAA for the healthcare. Make sure that they are in compliance with those. From an actual deployment perspective, though, things like authentication, making sure that you're using 802.1x if you're able to support that, WPA3, new authentication mechanism. Other vendors have kind of private pre-shared key solutions that allow you to have unique credentials to get on the network. So you can track what users are doing a little bit more closely without having that open network that everyone in your entire town knows the password to. So set appropriate measures, make sure you're following those, and restrict what people are able to access on your network. And you can do that again, all from that single interface directly in the cloud NMS.
And another very interesting question that we have in the audience, and I'll keep it to you, is there are a lot of SMEs in Singapore, right? Especially who are trying to who have a lot of data, who have the technology requirements. How are you convincing them to move to the cloud? Because another point that Rabindra mentioned earlier as well, there may be a lot of need for education. Beyond that, how do you help clients really move to the cloud, or any recommendation on this cloud journey, right, for SMEs?
Was that to me? Sorry.
Alexandra, if you can address.
Yeah. So, I guess in terms of migration, is there an actual path to the cloud from the vendor? Some vendors offer, they hold your hand, they move you from kind of a premises-based solution up to the cloud. So definitely ask about that migration journey. Sometimes you do have to do, net new configurations, deployments. But once you're in the cloud, you are in the cloud, and it will be able to adapt and grow with you over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I saw that question. They were asking about kind of cost as well. A lot of vendors are offering, no cost moves to the cloud. So talk to them about that. But typically when you move from a hardware on-premises solution to more of a cloud-based subscription, you are going to save money in the long run. You just need to look at total cost of ownership over, a period of time, and maintenance associated with that as well.
Fantastic answer. And the reason, because we also did a poll in between and we asked people, is cloud networking really a priority for your organization, right? And that ties up so well to your question, because the responses we got is 57% of respondents have said yes, we've already moved to the cloud networking, while another 9% have said that we plan to move the next 6 to 12 months. It's only, that means we're talking about 90% of organizations really saying in some way or another that they have moved to the cloud and networking, or they plan to do this. Right? So I think that ties up very well with this entire discussion we've had. So I think in the interest of time, we've just finished the time that we had in hand. But clearly there is a strong need to build this workplace of the future. We will need the right strategy, the planning, the education, the infrastructure, the analytics layer on top of it, and of course you'll have to wrap it up with the right security layer, because we heard that way too often in this discussion. So I think it was a fantastic discussion, and thank you again, Rabindra, Alexandra, Rubaiyat, Dami, to make this very, very insightful for all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.